Now we turn to former official in the United States Trade Representative's Office, Steve Gill. Thanks for joining us from Nashville, Steve.
Thanks, Scotty.
Okay, we've been talking about this, so I have to ask, with no deal on the horizon between the U.S. and China that we know of, do you think negotiators should start pushing the deadline of March 1st?
Yeah, I think there is a deal on the horizon. The question is whether that horizon is in the next 2 weeks or whether they're going to need to push it another 60 days or so. I think that they're close enough and that they are making enough progress that both sides are wanting to have more time to work out some of the more difficult complexities, which, as was just mentioned, include the intellectual property, the protection of the technology deals, and the forced partnerships that are being put in place in China. Those are still very difficult issues. They aren't making as much progress on that as the U.S. Being able to sell more goods, whether it's semiconductors, whether it's soybeans, and other items. I think it's interesting. It'd be interesting to look at the map and see, just from the political standpoint, if you're having semiconductor sales increase, that's going to certainly help in Silicon Valley. If you're looking at soybeans and agriculture sales, that's going to help the political implications in the South, Tennessee, and other places. And what are the other products that we're going to see gains in that may buy a little bit of extra political clout as they try to still figure out a way to a deal?
Well, that's the thing about a deal. You know, they've been there all this week talking. Are you a little bit surprised, considering this presidency and the leaks that we've had from the White House and other organizations, that we're not hearing that much about what's actually going on during these talks at these tables right now? Wouldn't you think we would at least have some sort of hint whether or not they were getting closer and where they were focusing besides just what we think they are?
I think we are getting good hints that they're getting close to a deal. I think what we're not getting are the details. And keep in mind that whether it's the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, whether it's the Treasury Department, whether it's on the Chinese side, the same sort of officials, these are some of the agencies of government that have the most highly trained, highly experienced people in the trade and international arena. You don't get a lot of leaks out of the U.S. Trade Representative's Office or the Department of the Treasury. So I'm not surprised that the details aren't leaking, particularly when you have some very tight negotiations going on, and they don't want to blow the negotiations by letting details work out a little bit earlier.
Well, that's interesting, Steve, because you're right. Experience matters, and they understand how important this is and how they would rather play this out at the table than necessarily in the eyes of the media. So many times this has happened under this president. Speaking of the president, President Trump said he was not going to make a deal with China until he meets face-to-face with President Xi Jinping. Do you think the White House should make it a point to invite President Xi Jinping to Vietnam while he holds the summit, the second summit with North Korean leader Xi Jinping?
You know, I think because China is relevant to the negotiations with North Korea, it makes some sense to have them involved in this sort of visual summit. Also, maybe to help nudge things along a little bit more with North Korea, as there are some indications that they haven't made as much progress in actually reaching terms as we would have liked. So I think the combination of having him there to put a little extra pressure on North Korea to get to a deal, and also to give President Trump and Xi an opportunity to kind of have their own personal relationship, maybe move the trade deal forward as well. I think the other interesting thing, and you mentioned the kind of new split between the British, the United Kingdom, and China. While the U.S. and China seem to be getting closer to a deal, it's kind of like squeezing a balloon. We get closer here. You have some in China who are going to reach out more aggressively in other parts of the world. And while they may be making accords with us, you may be seeing them push back against people like Britain. You may see them do more activities in South America, in China. Just because we're coming together perhaps in a trade deal doesn't mean they're going to try to expand their global footprint in other places around the world.
Well, it's interesting you bring this up, as we're also looking at the UK and Brexit right now, and you're seeing different countries that are looking to make deals individually outside of the EU with Britain. I have to go back to this. So do you think Kim Jong-un would like to see North Korea, would like to see China at the table as well? Does that benefit both sides? Does it kind of act as someone that can get along with both sides and able to make a deal?
I think it's kind of like a Thanksgiving table, Scotty. If Kim Jong-un has both President Trump and President Xi at the table, he's sitting at the big kids table, maybe even the adults table. And I think that's kind of where he wants to elevate himself on the world stage. So moving himself to the big kids table and maybe the adult table would be good from his standpoint. I think it's also good from ours, though, because it puts him into the national arena. He's going to like that. He wants to be a player, and, you know, sitting at the big kids table may be something that helps him reach a deal.
Well, that's the thing, Steve. I think anybody with a nuke, or at least the fear of a nuke, should automatically be given a seat. I don't know why anybody would want to sit at the big kids table. Anyways, I prefer the children's table myself and the food that they serve. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
As long as you get an extra piece of pie.
Exactly.